He outworked, he out-communicated, and he out-organized the opposition, and that's clearly why he was successful.
So what's holding you back from endorsing him right now?
Well, we don't really know each other well. Our districts don't overlap. I have never...
2, protect our city from a hostile White House. And 3, diversify our city's public safety response. By increasing the minimum wage to $20 by 2028 and passing rent stabilization to stop price gouging and incentivizing new construction, we can protect workers. Protecting all of our communities from Donald Trump means not letting MPD interact with ICE.
There's another one? That is right, there is another one. So, the situation for both establishment Democrat leadership, who I do not care for, but also the unfortunate citizens of these cities who do not vote for these types of policies, which I very much do care for, just continues to go from bad to worse. Because the reality by now is that this Zohran Mandani phase is simply not going away. And even if they wanted it to, the sheer fact of the matter is that people like Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and party leadership are far too weak, disorganized, and inept to do anything to stop it. And as it currently stands, not only is Zohran looking to become the favorite right now to win that New York City's mayor's race, especially after news today that Andrew Cuomo continues to be a selfish, bad actor who apparently wants to sabotage the city and get Zohran elected out of some type of spite. But on top of that, apparently the movement here is spreading nationwide, because out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, definitely a city that's been known for, definitely stability and not massive crime and not massive fires and riots and burning there over the past 4 years. I'm obviously being sarcastic here. May be getting its own version of Zohran Mandani after this guy, Omar Fateh. He is a Somalian Muslim socialist candidate here, is running for mayor on a policy here, as you can see, of freezing the rent, raising the minimum wage by $4 over the next couple of years, Trump-proofing the city, whatever that means. So apparently the current state of sanctuary cities you've seen is not radical enough, right? Let's protect all of the MS-13 illegal aliens and all that stuff. Let's, of course, shelter terrorists and many other threats. And apparently, as I've been long trying to make the case here, the most dangerous part for the average residents of these types of Zohran-style candidates is not even necessarily the loony socialist ideas, although there's much to be criticized there. It is the fact that he wants to see, as you can see here, a, quote, diversity public safety response, which in other words means defunding the police. That is right. After everything we saw in the past couple of years with the massive BLM crime wave and then the pushback in the other direction because people got tired of it, some Soros DAs were losing. Apparently how fast people forget or move on from these things. So that's happening here on one front. And in other news, apparently right now, off of the momentum of Zohran Mandani and this new wave of socialists taking over the party, Hakeem Jeffries is now, apparently, out of Mandani's supporters, facing those trying to mount a primary challenge against him. And so that certainly is a silver lining here, is that while the Democrat Party goes crazy and loses its mind, at the very least, they are going to be a divided front going into 2026. And that is, of course, huge, huge, huge. We'll get into all of these stories here today out of both Minneapolis, New York City, and the coffers of Democrat Party rule. So with that said, guys, do us a favor as usual. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you are new. Subscribing to the channel is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, let us, of course, just start here, showing you apparently the new wave that is striking Minneapolis, as today, this guy right here, Omar Fateh, who seems to be running here on a platform that is very similar. He is currently a Minnesota state senator out of the Minneapolis region, launched his campaign for mayor, and you may notice some things here seem awfully, awfully familiar.
Everyone keeps asking me, Omar, why aren't you doing more videos? As a state senator with a second full-time job and a kid on the way, I just haven't been able to find the time. I've also been fighting for you, passing things like tuition-free college for working-class families, rideshare protections for our Uber and Lyft drivers, and the legalization of fentanyl testing strips. But this summer, you're going to be seeing a lot more of me, because we deserve nice things in Minneapolis too. To make an affordable Minneapolis that works for everyone, we need a mayor that works as hard as you do. I'm ready to work hard to 1. Build a Minneapolis that working people can afford to call home. 2. Protect our city from a hostile White House. And 3. Diversify our city's public safety response. By increasing the minimum wage to $20 by 2028 and passing rent stabilization to stop price gouging and incentivizing new construction, we can protect workers. Protecting all of our communities from Donald Trump means not letting MPD interact with ICE, whether it's for an immigration raid or not. Our residents deserve a mayor that will stand up to Donald Trump and say, no, not in our community. Did you know that the city's own data showed that 47% of calls to MPD can be diverted to non-police response? Cops aren't social workers. Investments in programs like these ensure that the appropriate response arrives when we call 911. And we can actually free up police resources to focus on violent crime that detracts from community safety. Oh, I'm sorry. It's my campaign managers again. They've been on my case all week about make more videos. I'll find the time tomorrow.
Now, I will say one smart thing that I thought Zohran did in New York City is, despite the fact that he's had a long track record and it's very obvious where he stands on issues like defunding the police and so-called criminal justice reform, that he sort of diverted from that, right? He made his campaign not even about necessarily calling himself a socialist on the campaign trail, but more so saying, hey, look, I have these like populist ideas to solve affordability. What's worth noting here from Omar is he's not even really doing that. Of course, he's playing to a degree into that type of stuff. He wants to do a freeze on rent controls, right? Which have historically worked in the history of absolutely nowhere, right? That's just a total disaster on one front. But noticeably, right, he is fully willing to double down on that. He says he wants to Trump-proof the city, which of course means trying to block ICE as much as possible, including from the deportation of violent criminals and the like. And if you were at all a little bit skeptical of where he stands, apparently, after all you saw in 2020 and the years since, where Minneapolis is basically, in many parts, a ghost town, totally destroyed by soft on crime policies and lunatics burning stuff, apparently bringing right back to this like 2020 messaging of defund the police, send in a social worker instead of a police officer, etc., etc. So with that said, I think that this ought to be maybe the biggest point to drive home about both Zohran, but also this case right here with Omar, which is these people are largely standing as Trojan horses to their own cities, which is a story we've seen before, but apparently, again, how fast people forget, because they're going to run on some economic reforms and it's going to sound good. Hey, look, my rent's been going up. Yeah, I could use some rent stabilization. I could make the city more affordable. That is true. I'm sure many people cannot afford to live. But then the Trojan horse ultimately comes in, and guess what? You're dealing with a nation, ironically, a city, I should say, that looks like Mogadishu, Somalia, because it is totally an anarchic nightmare, largely thanks to the so-called criminal justice reform policies that have completely destroyed these major cities. And so again, that ought to be the strongest attack line that we have here. These people are going to be soft on crime, of course, at the very same exact time here that this guy, Omar, is launching his campaign. This comes on the same week that apparently ICE just arrested 11 illegal alien sex offenders, some sex offenders, including even those dealing with children. Guess what? In where? The Minneapolis metro area. So that's what we're dealing with, right? While this guy wants to keep ICE out of the city, and, I don't know, they're going to send a social worker apparently to deal with people trying to diddle kids or something. Here is the reality of what ICE is doing right now in the city of Minneapolis.
11 men arrested by ICE in the Twin Cities last month, targeting what federal officials are calling the worst of the worst. This news release from the Department of Homeland Security even calls out Governor Tim Walz, saying he and his fellow sanctuary politicians are fighting to keep these sex offenders and other criminal illegal aliens in our country. Instead of comparing ICE to the Nazi Gestapo, Governor Walz should be thanking our law enforcement for removing these pedophiles from Minnesota.
Right, but what inevitably is happening here is that in deep blue Democrat cities, who, by the way, even in 2024, kind of voted out some of their soft on crime George Soros-backed DAs, are totally consumed here by Trump derangement syndrome, which, as we so often say, is an ultimately self-destructive endeavor. Because these people, in the name of stopping ICE, standing up to the Trump administration, are apparently willing to vote for a mayoral candidate who is going to enable these types of people to be once again running all over the city of Minneapolis. But of course, what could you expect? I have no dog in the fight, frankly. I do not live in either of these cities. I think it would be ideal for America's largest population centers to not be total nightmares, okay? But with that in mind, ultimately, if push comes to shove here and the voters of these areas are going to decide what they voted for and then get it and then regret it, don't, of course, look at us but simultaneously, right, don't look at Democrat leadership either, considering despite their kind of reservations about Mandani, I think it's worth noting here that their cowardice, their ineffectiveness, and their actual ability to embrace the radicalism of their party when it benefited them, and now it's turning against them, nothing really there that we ought to feel all that bad for. But with that in mind, even just this weekend, actually today I should say, Trump's authoritarianism, according to Zohran Mandani here, he's blaming it for the so-called rapid decline of tourists coming to New York City, which I don't know how accurate those numbers necessarily are, but I have to say for a city that crowded and has a very diversified economy, I don't know, maybe that's kind of a convenient thing actually for the people of New York. It's a little less congested, but nonetheless, making it clear here where he stands, and again, as I repeat, these might be more important campaign points than even the weird stuff about government-ran grocery stores, saying here, quote, "I will make it clear that the world is welcome in this city." Of course, what do you mean by that, Zohran? Well, I think we know the answer to it.
As we, as Bob was saying, fight back against an authoritarian administration and Donald Trump's attempt at ripping up the very fabric of the city that we call home, of the country that we belong to and that we love, we know that his policies, they are not just disappearing our neighbors, detaining our friends, they are also turning the world away from our city. The rapid decline of tourists coming to this city is an issue not simply for us living up to our word as a city that welcomes the world, but it's one that has very real economic impacts for artists that are with me here today and those beyond. It is the difference between whether or not people can afford to keep calling the city their home. And so I will be proud to be the mayor of this city, to stand up for this city, and to make it clear that the world is welcome in this city, and that we need to turn the page on this federal administration that is looking to inspire fear among people across this country and across this world when they come to think of who we are and what we are.
Well, first of all, are Trump's policies actually the ones driving away international tourists, or is it your fear-mongering about it? That's probably a valid question to be asking here. But also, right, on top of that, I find it ironic on many levels that this is the argument being made, because first of all, when you look at the Zohran-style characters across the world, many of them right now, in places like Mexico, and Spain, and parts of Europe, Italy, etc., are actually leading anti-tourism protests. Largely, a lot of leftists are involved in this stuff, and a big reason for that is because, of course, when you have a lot of Airbnbs and stuff in the city, areas get gentrified for tourists. The native residents of those areas are not really able to afford the rent anymore, but apparently Zohran Mandani, who first campaigned on affordability from a left-wing perspective, is just now engaging in full Trump derangement syndrome, where he's like, oh, okay, please send overpriced Airbnbs into our city. Not exactly sure there. But also, let me also further make this point, okay? You know what else scares away tourists, Zohran? Crime, right? The fact that New York City is perceived by many to be dangerous. And guess what? Guess what? As the city, just this year, hit its lowest crime rate in 25 years, what are you proposing? You want to defund the police? You want to do all of these crazy, nonsensical reforms to community policing, right? Much like your friend Omar, the diversifying our police response, all that stuff. I wonder what impact that's going to have on international tourists long after Trump is gone, I should say, Zohran. I don't know, just saying on that front. But the unfortunate news here, guys, is I think it's probably far too soon here to figure out whether this Omar guy over in Minneapolis has any shot, although given the way that it went in New York City, probably honestly is the case, right? I think there are a lot of people right now clamoring for radicalism simply because, again, they are so consumed here by the Trump derangement syndrome. But on top of that, right, apparently today, out of New York City, we have pure selfishness on display because despite the Democrat establishment supposedly fearing the rise of Zohran Mandani, they seem to be fully intent on allowing this guy to take power because just today the announcement came out of Andrew Cuomo that he is set to run as an independent in the New York City mayor's race. Okay, he's going to be relaunching a new campaign going on the ballot. Of course, you got to be begging a number of questions here. After, first of all, you already lost a Democrat primary. Are you just going to take the hint, okay? A big reason Zohran won for the first place is because you are not a compelling candidate. People are sick of you. They don't want to deal with you, etc., for whatever reason that might be. But secondly here, right? I think when you look at the current state of the polling, right? So the new poll, this is about where it is right now in New York City. Mandani is polling at 40%, Cuomo at 24%, Eric Adams at 15%, and then Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate, at 14%. I think when you do a basic look at the math there, if all three of these candidates, but especially even if that were just Cuomo and Adams, you'd at least come close. If they join forces, Zohran Mandani would not be elected the mayor. But guess what? All of these people don't want to join together, make a deal. They basically want to all stand on the fence of selfishness here, because you have all this like ego and self-aggrandizing. Like Andrew's like, I want to be the mayor. Eric's like, no, I want to be the mayor. How about some of you pick who you want to be the mayor and then join forces and make sure this lunatic does not destroy your city, who you claim is a threat to what you're dealing with here? I don't know, just a open point there to be raised. But of course, this is now all coming on the same time, guys, that out of House Democrat leadership, Hakeem Jeffries, apparently another establishment Democrat currently feeling the heat about this, as you can see here, he flipped out when he was asked about Mandani supporters trying to mount a primary challenge against him, because while, of course, the establishment Democrats are so inept and incompetent, they can't even stop Mandani, right? They're fighting, oh, who should run for mayor? Privately here, the Democrat Civil War, the revolution against establishment rule in their party by the young woke radical crazies, as they so often frame it, is simply intensifying. So take a listen here to this recent CNN interview where Hakeem Jeffries was asked about, what do you think about these efforts to take you out of office? And he, as usual, just does not really know how to answer any questions.
Leader Jeffries, I also want to talk to you about Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor in New York City. CNN has new reporting that some progressives who empowered Mamdani to victory now want to primary you and other Democrats in New York City. The co-chair of the New York City's Democratic Socialists of America says he thinks you're picking fights, quote, with the left instead of focusing on fighting the right. His words. Asked whether Mamdani thinks those House incumbent challenges should happen, his press secretary told CNN he was declining to comment, at least for now. How do you respond?
I have no idea what these people are talking about. We are going to continue to focus our efforts, as we did on the House floor in connection with Donald Trump's one big ugly bill, on pushing back against the extremism that has been unleashed on the American people. It's clear to us as House Democrats, it's clear to us as members of the New York City delegation, that the problem is Donald Trump and House Republicans, who have launched this unprecedented assault on the American way of life, an assault on health care. They're ripping food out of the mouths of children, veterans, and seniors. They're exploding the national debt. They're unleashing mass agents on law-abiding immigrant communities. It shouldn't be too difficult for some people to figure out who the problem is in the United States of America.
The Democratic leader, the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, thanks as usual for joining us.
Thank you.
So as usual, he just simply deflects to Trump, as he does on basically anything, because Hakeem cannot actually speak for what the Democrat Party, specifically its establishment rule of leadership, stands for, because the answer there is essentially nothing. But as you see him basically brush off and downplay the efforts here by progressives to get him out of office, which would be a hilarious thing to watch, on the eve of the 2026 midterms in that year's primary, your House minority leader, you're presumably, if they won there, the future Speaker of the House, loses his freaking election. That would be a great thing to be running on. So honestly, I'm cheering for the progressives. I hope they're successful, honestly, in their bid to unseat Jeffries there. But he better hope that that threat maybe is not all that real. Of course, Andrew Cuomo is another character who thought, oh, I can just cruise into this. I'm establishment Democrat. And then what he rapidly found out is a lot of even of the Democrat voters are not very happy with their party leadership for whatever reason, right? Some of those reasons may be justified, others simply because they're literally insane and they're basically saying, oh, why are you not, burning down the White House to protest against Trump or something? You know how that basically goes. But again, this is not something necessarily, given everything we've seen, I think Hakeem Jeffries ought to take it so lightly, but he ought to do so at his own expense, because it will certainly be an entertaining thing for us to watch. I hope this happens. Go into the midterms, tear yourselves apart. Now, with that said, I think there's another important point to be had here, put very well by Charlie Kirk here, in terms of potentially the future threat, or how we ought to interpret leaders like Zohran Mandani, who, as I said earlier, are Trojan horses, right? They sound like, hey, They're sort of economic populists. They care about people. Obviously, establishment leaders in both parties do not seem like they really care about anything, but how to avoid that Trojan horse. As you can see here, he notes that the next generation, my generation, Gen Z, is primed, yes, for a permanent conservative political realignment, the most dramatic realignment we've seen since Woodstock, but it's not guaranteed. We have to address the economic anxieties, the honest ones, of our youngest voters. We need to ensure they can become a generation of owners, not renters. If we don't, there will be more Zohran Mandanis, Omar Fatehs, and Abdul El Sayeds, right? Essentially people here who come along and offer some type of solution to the problems that we currently face, instead of establishment rule basically telling especially younger Americans that, hey, everything is fine. Right? Never mind the fact that you need to basically, even adjusted for inflation, make about 4 times what your grandparents made to own a home, and you basically have no shot at doing it. Everything is fine, right? The populist energy in America will either flow into MAGA populist conservatism that restores the American dream, or yes, racial grievance-driven, free stuff socialism that destroys it. It is a race against the clock. We have 3.5 years to deliver, and if we do, we will change the course of American history for the better. We must deliver, or else you could see an AOC right in 2028. That's definitely something to keep in mind, but for now, we are watching for all of the Democrat infighting. Truly an entertaining sight to witness. With that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.